Hello and welcome to the Sky Blue Times YouTube channel. Today I wanted to run through my thoughts ahead of the game tomorrow against Spurs, run that risk of looking like a complete idiot within 24 hours, but just kind of talk through my ideas about what the team could be, some of the things he may be thinking about when we're looking at previous games against Spurs we played at the Etihad, as well as games that I've seen from Thomas Frank recently that I think are relevant. Let's start with the 3-3 draw 23-24 season against Spurs, as we went to win 4 titles in a row. This team is one that we saw throughout the season quite regularly. Gvardiol, Walker, your 2 fullbacks, Kanji Diaz as your centre-backs, Rodri, Alvarez playing that kind of 10-second striker role, really bringing his off-ball work rate to the team with his runs ahead of the ball, as well as his pressing ability, playing alongside Erling Haaland in that 4-4-2 high press. Bernardo Silva in there, Foden, Doku on either wing. And then when we're looking at that Spurs team, that we see right here, that was under Ange Postecoglou. They had in this game, as well as the next game we'll come to, they had issues with centre-backs, so you've got Royal and Davies playing as a centre-back there. And it ended up being really quite a game, chaotic, a bit more end-to-end than we would have liked. Not the kind of game we'd like to see against the more top 6 sides, but really that season, it was a season we struggled against the top 6 sides to really have proper control in those games, and wasn't really surprised to see us drop points in that situation. But you can see all the hallmarks of why that team was successful that season, because of the different things that these players did bring to these games. But still, you could see within that the holes that were there. Out of possession, how easily we can be played through at times. How clunky it could be in midfield and so on, and the kind of compromises you were making that just weren't ideal, but then given the players at Guardiola's disposal, it does make a little bit of sense there. But yeah, this one ended up being 3-3, as you can see with the Spurs 11, not particularly impressive at all. So to think they drew 3-3 is definitely disappointing in hindsight when you're looking at the team, and you think how Basuma is really on his way out of Spurs, and Son coming towards the end of his career, Lo Celso, Hill, Royale, like really a lot of players there that you wouldn't consider to be in the best Spurs 11 yet. A team that came and gave City a good go in that match. If we move over to this next one here, so this is from the 4-0 defeat last season. This is one of, if not for a lot of people, the worst performance of the season, to lose at home so convincingly to Spurs in a game that we created plenty of chances, couldn't take any of them, which is a big problem last season, and then to just be so susceptible on the break. You had players that were just so easily able to drive through our midfield. Kulusevski was one of them, who was excellent at receiving the ball high pitch and then just driving his way inside. I don't think it should be a surprise when you look at Gundogan, Bernardo and then Rico Lewis playing in that midfield that you saw those problems come up. Kyle Walker there, who really did drop off in his performances as well as physically last season. That Stones and Akanji partnership, Stones obviously ridden with injury last season, and Akanji kind of goes under the radar for being quite poor last season in my opinion. And then you've got Savinho, Foden either wing, Gvardiol playing at left back, Edison in goal, and that game really was poor from City all across the board. Now, the main thing that really stood out in that game was the transitions, that Spurs were just so easily able to cut through us, be decisive and score their goals. And then second to that was just City struggling to be able to take their chances despite creating a lot. And momentum in these games really does swing quite quickly. City did have some really good early chances in that first half. Don't take any of them. And then Spurs go away with the game later on. But still, when you're thinking about the team City are going to play, you're not going to see Gundogan play number 6. Bernardo, there's a good chance of playing in midfield. I doubt you're going to see Rico Lewis there in midfield, as you'd expect that to be Tijani Reinders. Both wingers, Savinho and Foden, unlikely both of them are going to start. You'd expect Haaland to start. Unlikely to see Gvardiol will start at left back or even left centre back. Good chance to see Stone start. Good chance to see Edison start. Kyle Walker's left the club. So when we're looking at that team, as well as reminding ourselves of this team over here, where we've got Alvarez, who's left, Rodri unlikely to start on his way back from injury. You've still got like Doku may start, but within these two teams here, there's going to be very few players across those two 11s that are going to be starting in this game. So you've got that kind of proper refreshment of the team, and a lot of the players that we've mentioned that will start or likely to start will be very useful. Will be selected for a purpose rather than they've just been here the whole time and they're like our kind of only option to pick. So if Jeremy Doku is somebody that's going to get picked, it's because he has a specific role to be able to hold the width, his carrying ability, his 1v1 ability that's getting him in the team. Otherwise it will be somebody else. If Ruben Diaz is in there, that is selected because of his performances in the last couple of games, that partnership with John Stones, how well they played the offside trap, how well they managed that back line to deal with the long balls that Wolves did throw at City a lot of the time. From goal kicks, it'll be on that merit, or he'll be swapped out for somebody like a Kusanov because you want that additional pace in recovery. But yeah, the team is very, very refreshed. And now if we move over to games from Thomas Frank, I think are a bit more relevant given the different ways that Spurs will play under Ange Postecoglou versus Thomas Frank. Against PSG, this was in the Super Cup, went to a 5 at the back, played Paulinho, Bentancur and Sarr in midfield, Kudus and Richarlison as the two off there. You have the two wing backs that are able to be really quite defensive, particularly in Spence, that's great defending 1v1, but then able to explode out if need be. Kudus, incredible signing for Spurs, somebody that, especially playing this kind of way in transition, can really make the ball stick and is able to carry the ball through congested central spaces, deal with really strong defenders like Pacho, and still manage to dribble the ball up the pitch. Richarlison, real kind of handful in the box. So you got a nice mix between the two of them as that kind of front two when they're playing these type of games. And Spurs in this game were, for the most part, organised, applied good pressure, took their chances, defended quite well, and then bit by bit, as we go into that second half, you just saw PSG eventually break them down. And that's the issue with this kind of approach. You do need to score those early goals like they did, but you're leaving a team that has loads of possession, that wants to have the possession, that is excellent at rotating between these different players and creating chances. You're just giving the game over to them to be able to do that. So when we're thinking about Frank coming to play against Manchester City with Spurs, I expect to see a similar setup to this, but they need to apply more pressure constantly throughout the match. They can't sit off and get deeper and deeper as they did as time passed in the second half against PSG. And they do need to be clinical again, like they did in this match. They would need to do that at the Etihad. And this kind of setup really is similar to what we saw at Brentford, but then one thing just before we shift to that, I think Sarr is somebody worth talking about. He was excellent in that midfield to really disrupt the rhythm of the other midfielders, Doué, Vitinha and Zaire Emery. Really physical, you think, compared to when we were playing against Wolves, playing at 5 back. The kind of physical presence that Sarr will have to be able to cover the ground and win the ball back compared to the likes of Andre and João Gomez. That's somebody to keep an eye on. And if you're Nico Gonzalez, you have to be aware of that. How well you position yourself and turn on a ball, etc. Because he will apply a lot of pressure and he'll be able to do it all game. So he's somebody to keep an eye on. Now, if we move to this game here, this was Brentford when they played City at home last season. So they come away to the Etihad, played a 5 at the back, played 2 up front, 2 forwards that are really good at linking the play out wide and centrally, 3-man midfield, and then those 2 fullbacks that are excellent at pushing up if need be. They press City really high, and they defended really, really deep, and that's the kind of thing I'd expect to see from Spurs this weekend. They will try and high press us, which I think is why somebody like Edison coming in to start this game is going to be important, because Spurs will press high and you'll need that player calm under pressure to break the lines and so on. I think Trafford definitely has shown the skill set is going to be there in time, but in the short term, I think it's great if Edison is fit to play, to be able to deal with the high press of Brentford. you'll be reminded when you think back at that game that we exposed Brentford 1v1 with that high press and then leaving Haaland 1v1 with Pinnock, I think it was at the time, picked up by Edison for a goal. So I think that's going to be something in the mind of Thomas Frank as well as in the mind of Guardiola. That if Spurs are going to press high, then we need Edison to be able to help deal with that situation. I think that also brings to mind Omar Marmoush. Do you include him being an additional person to make those runs in behind? Are you happy with Dejani Reinders doing that still? So you don't need it. We'll get onto it a bit later. But this is the approach by Brentford to press us high. They really did make us issues for like Kyle Walker, Savinho, etc. down on this right-hand side. If I remember right, Walker was getting pinned and then Savinho had two players that he had to cover. So I think if I remember correctly, Potter would pin Walker and then Collins would come right out, and then you'd have Yan out and Buemo able to come across and support. And so they were always finding a 2v1 on that right-hand side, and City were pressing more of like a 4-2-4 at the time, really quite aggressive with De Bruyne and Haaland, and then flanked by two players. So Brentford just had more success being able to play out from the back on that side. Damsgaard over on our left side, really good at dropping deep, coming across to help Ayer and Van der Berg deep in the corner. And then Visser would be really quite high. So then they'd outnumber Grealish, De Bruyne, who would come across to that side, create 2v1s, and then they'd be able to find a pass to Visser, who would then be one-on-one with Rico Lewis. So no surprise that they changed Vardiol at half-time for Rico Lewis to come on and play left-back for the second half. I believe Rodri came on for the second half, come on at half-time, and that made all the difference to help City just control the game better, deal with the high press of Brentford even better, and then they just reduced how much risk they were willing to take in the high press, so dropped off from that like 4-2-4 to a 4-4-2. But yeah, I think we're going to see something quite similar from Brentford in this approach. I think across the kind of top 6 games where Frank goes to play against them with Spurs, we'll see a similar approach to what we saw at PSG, but try and improve the quality of the players with some transfers, try and make sure that the pressure is a bit more consistent throughout the match and so on. But yeah, I expect to see a similar approach. Now, that brings me to the last couple of things. So this is from the 24-25 season, the minutes rank for Manchester City players across all competitions, so the top 15 minutes. That's highlighted in purple. And then in blue, I've highlighted the top 15 minutes from that first game. So who are the guys that started the match? So I think there's 5 or 6 people who got 90 minutes. I think Stones got like 85. And then you had other couple guys that were subbed on and subbed off. And just from that, if you're looking at players that are 28 and above, you've only got Ruben Diaz, John Stones and Bernardo Silva. Compared to last season, the ranking across the entire season, you had Bernardo Silva, Edison, Gundogan, Akanji, Kovacic, De Bruyne and Ortega all within that top 15. So you can see quite clearly there the shift towards using younger players, obviously the players that have come in, but then you think about players from January, Kusanov, you think about Nico Riley who came on and got involved, Rico Lewis as well that's been here for a while, and that should only continue when you think about Rodri coming in, somebody that's below 30, Phil Foden that should come and play a lot of minutes, Josko Vardiol that will come in and play a lot of minutes. So that team is getting a lot fresher, a lot younger, particularly the players that will play a lot of the minutes compared to last season. Now, if we move across to what I'm thinking they're going to do, so as you can see, similar setup to what we've seen from Brentford, from PSG in those couple games. I think we'll see a very similar kind of starting 11 to what he played against PSG, given he made a few changes for the game against Burnley, which obviously at home much easier game for Spurs, and they did well to win, although probably quite easy. I think looking at Burnley compared to some of the other promoted teams. For Manchester City, I think Marmoush Doku is the kind of question mark. So I'm thinking he's going to go for Marmoush, given you're going to have the opportunity to play in behind Spurs a bit more when they do press high. I think with Jeremy Doku, you saw some of the issues that City had on that left-hand side in the first game against Wolves. I think part of that is Haaland with his pressing wasn't timing it correctly, so it was making it a bit too easy. I think Bernardo cheated a bit too much in the middle when he was jumping to press on top of Andre. But if we're talking the second game of the season, those stuff I think will be solved in time. But in the short term, I'm thinking he's not going to take the risk of playing Doku and just go for Marmoush, taking that trade-off and then knowing that he's able to make those runs in behind. But don't get me wrong, it wouldn't surprise me to see Jeremy Doku start this game. As well, you want to continue the theme from the game against Wolves to stretch that back line and have the space to play through the middle of the pitch. So that approach I expect to see. But I think with Marmoush, you just might see that trade-off where you're going to ask him to hold width a lot more than he probably would want to, and he's probably best suited to do so. But then, at least in the short term, you want to get somebody that's just going to give you a bit more intensity, and it's just a little bit more switched on out of possession to stop some of those 2v1s that could happen, particularly when you're talking about Kudus on that left-hand side. If you're struggling and leaving him a lot of space to be able to carry into, as great as I think Aitanori is actually defending 1v1 compared to what people think he is, you just don't want to be giving him situations where he has to defend with Kudus regularly throughout the game. But apart from that, I think there's a good chance we see a very similar starting 11 to what we saw against Wolves. Keep that kind of consistency throughout the team. I think you're struggling to see major issues with a lot of the players. I remember in their game against Wolves, we saw a good amount of City with their kind of high press where Nico would drop into the back line to give him that +1. Rico Lewis would kind of make the judgment of when to step forward, when to not. And the kind of knock on from that, as I mentioned a bit earlier, if Haaland doesn't make those pressing runs correctly, then you can end up with Rico Lewis and Oscar Bob pushing high, but on the same man. So then you're leaving the space out on the left-hand side, and then Doku's getting caught in those 2v1 situations, and then the space is then left for somebody to drive at Aitanori. So I think that's the kind of trade-off you're looking for. Are you looking to try and cover up that hole out of possession just for the time being? Or do you need somebody just more suited to holding the width, being right along the touchline in Jeremy Doku? That's the main kind of trade-off. I expect Edison to come in and be really beneficial to be able to play out from the back against the high press we should see from Spurs. Still think Bernardo will start, Reinders and Nico in that midfield. I think we'll see Rodri and Foden off the bench. I think we'll see Cherki off the bench. I think Diaz, maybe you could debate about whether you want to bring in Kusanov and just add more kind of recovery pace. He's brilliant at making those kind of recovery challenges as well in the channels. So perhaps you want to bring in Kusanov for Diaz just in case to support Aitanori and deal with those transitions a little bit better, just have a little bit more safety there. But apart from that, I think Rico Lewis and Bob have a great relationship. Expect to see the two of them. I don't think you've got somebody particularly dangerous on that left-hand side. If Spurs do play a front three and you have Johnson or somebody else coming at him, then I could see why you look at maybe playing Mateus Nunes there. But as it stands, I think we'll probably see a similar kind of setup. And for this, I think you want to keep that consistency. You want to roll the team out that was against Wolves, that was fluid, that can just continue to build on that performance and know that you've got the bench to be able to change the game if need be. But yeah, that's pretty much it. General thoughts. Obviously, I can look an idiot within 24 hours with this, but I expect to see a real kind of consistency between the two 11s. And as I mentioned, Marmoush, Ruben Diaz, whether that's Jeremy Doku instead of Marmoush, whether that's Kusanov instead of Diaz, perhaps Mateus Nunes instead of Rico Lewis. But apart from that, I don't expect to see much change between the two 11s. And I think City have definitely got a great chance to win that game. I think they'll want to put right the performance of last season, as much as Guardiola may say. It's not that relevant. I think for the players that will be in their mind. And this is a great game to be able to show, on top of the Wolves performance, that you really are a proper title contender this season. If you can come out and beat this team that is definitely going to be well organised by Thomas Frank. Not their very best version with all the transfers that they failed in recently this summer. But yeah, it would be a real statement win to start the weekend, beating Spurs at the Etihad. So yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. If there's something I've missed, something you're a bit you question that I've said, let me know and I'll jump in, reply, and we can have that discussion. Make sure you like the video to help support the channel, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. We'll be back with plenty more content this week.